I hadn't intended to linger for long. My trip back home was meant to be brief. A couple of nights, 3 at most, just to touch base, crash in my own bed, and act like I still fit in this old neighborhood. College had made everything seem far away, quieter, as if the town I'd grown up in had gotten smaller while I was off finding myself. Yet here I was, pulling into the familiar driveway, the same sidewalk cracks staring up at me, the rusty gate groaning as it always had. I planned to catch up with Ethan, my best bud since middle school. But when I pressed the doorbell, it wasn't his voice that answered from the other side. It was hers. The door swung open, and there she was, his older sister, Mia. For a moment, I stood frozen. She wasn't the Mia I remembered. Back then, she sported glasses, baggy sweaters, and a loose ponytail, always holed up in her room with music seeping out. Now, though, she was different, still laid back, barefoot in yoga pants and a forest green hoodie, but she carried herself with a new confidence. Her gaze was sharper, her ponytail replaced by tousled hair that looked like she just rolled out of an unplanned nap. "Well, look at you," she said with a sly grin. "Decided to grace us with your presence, huh?" I chuckled softly. "Hey, didn't know you were still crashing here." She leaned against the doorframe, relaxed. "Just for now. Ethan didn't mention you were coming by." "Typical," I grumbled. "He said 3 o'clock. Guess I'm early." She stepped back, waving me in. "He's not here, gym shift. You're welcome to hang out and wait." I paused for a beat, then crossed the threshold. The house hadn't changed. Same coffee and laundry detergent scent with that faint woodsy hint I could never pin down. The entryway was untouched. Same mirror, same rug. But it all felt smaller now, and Mia, she seemed to fill the space more than before. We wandered into the kitchen. She moved with an easy ownership, like she'd claimed the place since her parents moved out last year. She grabbed a mug from the shelf, poured tea from a white ceramic pot, and without asking, poured one for me too. "Still not a fan of green tea, right?" she said, passing me the mug. I blinked, surprised. "You remember that?" She shot me a quick look. "You griped about it every time you came over for like 2 years." I grinned and took a sip, still bitter just like I remembered. We settled at the kitchen island. At first, the silence was comfortable, just 2 people passing the time. Then she started asking about college, my major, my plans, what I wanted out of life. Her questions weren't just small talk. They had weight. She listened, her eyes locked on mine, no distractions. And I started noticing things I probably shouldn't have. The way she cradled her mug with both hands, her thumbs grazing the edge. The way her hoodie slipped just a bit off her shoulder when she reached for a spoon. The faint scar on her knee I'd never seen before. And the way she looked at me. Not like she was trying to place a childhood friend, but like she was sizing me up, taking stock. At one point, I realized I was staring. She caught it, but instead of looking away, she just arched an eyebrow, a half-smirk tugging at her lips. "You're awfully quiet," she said. "I'm not as chatty as I used to be," I replied. "Nah," she said, tilting her head. "You're different now." I didn't know how to respond, so I just sipped my tea. She stood up. "Ethan might be running late. If you want, you can chill upstairs. Your old hangout spot's probably still plastered with posters." I smiled. That room was barely big enough for a chair. She nodded. "Then come to my room. It's got more space. You can wait there." That made me hesitate. She seemed to pick up on it. "Relax. I'm not gonna bite." I followed her up the stairs, each creak underfoot pulling up memories. Sneaking sodas into Ethan's room, watching movies way past midnight, trying to play it cool whenever Mia passed by back in high school. But now, trailing behind her, I was noticing things I hadn't before. Her door was open. The room was tidy, Candles on the desk, a sketchbook tossed on the bed. Nothing too personal. Just undeniably hers. Mia gestured toward a chair by the window. Take a seat. Or poke around if you're curious. I won't snitch. I chuckled and settled into the chair. She slipped off her sandals, padded over to the closet, and dragged out a cardboard box. I was sorting through some old junk anyway. Feel free to pitch in if you're bored. The box held a jumble of photos, old CDs, a couple of worn notebooks, and a snapped necklace. She plopped down on the bed, legs crossed, sifting through the contents. I stayed put in the chair, watching her, the tea in my hand now cold and forgotten. Here, she said, waving a faded snapshot. This was right after you drenched the couch in soda. I cringed. Total accident. Yeah, right? She teased. We both cracked up. Then a heavier silence settled in. She glanced up from the box, her eyes locking onto mine again. You seem different, she said, her voice quieter now. More grown up. Feeling it, I admitted. She tilted her head slightly. Still got a bit of that shy kid vibe, though, trailing behind Ethan. I shook my head with a grin. Not these days. Another beat of silence. She got up, strolled to the closet, and grabbed another hoodie, hers, and pulled it on with a slow, easy motion that felt oddly intentional. She half turned back to me, her voice soft but steady. You don't have to stick around, you know? I'm good here, I said. She arched an eyebrow. All right then. Then she said it low, almost like she was testing me. Shut the door first. I froze for a moment. She didn't crack a smile. The air felt different, charged with something I couldn't quite pin down but couldn't brush off either. I stood there, fingers grazing the edge of the door, wondering if I'd misheard. But she didn't say it again. She didn't budge. She just watched me with that same steady, unreadable look, waiting for my next move. So I pushed the door closed. No loud click, no dramatic thud, just the quiet slide of wood, shutting us in. Mia turned away like it was no big deal, settling back on the bed with her legs tucked under, flipping open one of the old notebooks. I lingered near the wall, my pulse kicking up faster than I wanted to admit, trying to convince myself the thump in my chest wasn't what it obviously was. You good? Mia asked, her eyes still on the notebook. Yeah. You sure about that? I nodded. Just caught off guard. By what, exactly? I scrambled for a safe response. Didn't think you'd remember me so well. I figured you'd just give a quick wave and vanish into your room like back in the day. She let out a soft chuckle. You really think I didn't see you back then? I glanced her way. You always seemed preoccupied, maybe even a little annoyed. I was faking it. She turned a page, avoiding my gaze. I'd hear you and Ethan trying to play it cool every time I walked by. You guys thought you were so smooth. I rubbed my neck, grinning sheepishly. We were total dorks. Yep, but you were kind of adorable. I froze. She tossed it out casually, like it was no big deal, but it hit me like a weight in my chest. She finally looked up. Still kinda are. I tried to keep my voice even. Just kinda. Her smile shifted. It wasn't playful or mocking, but something else, like she was testing the waters, maybe daring me to respond. You're not that kid I used to know, she said. Not even close. I sank back into the chair, trying to steady myself. I don't feel like one anymore. It shows. She leaned back on her hands, her hoodie riding up just a bit at the waist. I didn't mean to notice, but I did. She caught me looking. Her eyes held mine, and this time I couldn't break away. You know, she said, Ethan always acted like he had to look out for you. Like you were this shy, awkward little tag-along he didn't sign up for. I admitted, shy, clumsy. Not anymore. There it was again. That heavy pause, the air shifting like the room had warmed up without a sound. Something had cracked open between us, and neither of us knew how to seal it shut. She got up, strolled to the desk, and picked up a framed photo. I recognized it instantly, one from years back at the lake. Me scrawny and pale, no shirt. Her in a baggy flannel, clutching a soda, rolling her eyes at the camera. "You despised that day," she said, "because Ethan shoved me into the water." "No," she corrected, turning to face me. "Because you thought I watched you wipe out." "Well, you did." "I did," she admitted with a nod. And I laughed, but not for the reason you're thinking. She sat down again, closer this time. No desk separating us, just a small stretch of space. "I never saw you the way Ethan did," she went on. "You were quiet, sure, but you paid attention. You looked people in the eye. You were never really just a kid." "I was to you," I said. Her expression shifted, like my words didn't quite fit. "Not really. I just didn't think I was supposed to notice you back." The silence stretched out, heavy and thick. "What's different now?" I asked. She shrugged. "Maybe nothing. Maybe I'm just restless. Or maybe you've changed. Maybe you have too." She paused, considering. "Maybe." I leaned forward a bit. "So what's this all mean?" Her voice softened. "It doesn't have to mean anything." "I don't buy that." She glanced at her hands. "Me neither." I let out a breath, staring at the closed door. The silence screamed louder than anything. Then she stood again, slow and deliberate, moving not toward the closet but toward me. She stopped right in front of my chair, her legs brushing against my knees. "I never thanked you," she said. "For what?" "For being different. For seeing me." I looked up at her. Her eyes searched mine, not flirty, not pushy, just open. "I used to think I was making it up," she said. "The way you'd look at me when you thought no one noticed." "I wasn't exactly stealthy," I confessed. "No, but it wasn't like the others." Mia fiddled with the sleeves of her hoodie, then locked eyes with me and reached for the hem. She peeled it off, slow and intentional, not like she was stripping down or showing off, just removing it. Underneath was a fitted tank top, one strap sliding slightly off her shoulder, her hair tumbling loosely across her face. She tossed the hoodie onto the bed and met my gaze again. "Wanted to see if you'd still stare," she said. "I am," I admitted. She stepped back, perching on the bed's edge, hands braced behind her. "Good." I stayed glued to the chair, every muscle taut, torn between wanting to speak and fearing I'd ruin the delicate moment hanging between us. She sat quietly, fingers gripping the bed's edge, her tank top loose around her collarbone, her eyes never wavering from mine. "I used to wonder," she said, "if you looked at me like that because I was older or just because I was me. Back then, I didn't know the difference," I answered. "And now I do." She gave a slight nod, tilting her head, studying me with that same calm, unreadable expression. "You're not bailing, are you?" "Not unless you kick me out." A faint smile curved her lips. "I won't." I stood cautiously, not out of confidence but fear of breaking the fragile thread connecting us. She didn't flinch. If anything, she leaned back a bit, her chin tilting up like an invitation. I sat next to her on the bed's edge. We didn't touch, though our arms were close, almost brushing. The faint scent of warm laundry and vanilla clung to her, making my pulse race harder than anything else. She let out a breath. "This is dumb. I know. I should stop it. But you haven't." "No," she murmured. "I haven't." We sat in that heavy silence for what felt like forever. I could sense the warmth of her skin near mine, the tension in her fingers as they gripped the blanket. the quickening rhythm of her breathing. "Why now?" I asked. "After all these years?" She didn't meet my eyes at first. "Because I'd hate myself if I didn't let this happen at least once." I blinked. "Let what happen?" Her gaze found mine, steady and serious. "Whatever this is, whatever it becomes. Even if it's just this one moment?" She nodded. "Even then." My hand grazed hers. Not planned, just a nervous shift. And she didn't pull back. Instead, her fingers slowly curled around mine, warm and sure. We sat there side by side, silent. Then she turned toward me, her knee brushing mine as she bent her leg. Her eyes scanned my face, not searching for answers, but for truth. I gave it to her without speaking. She leaned in closer, then paused. "Still sure?" she asked. I didn't answer with words. I leaned in, my forehead resting against hers. We stayed there, sharing the same air, the quiet room amplifying the sound of our breathing. It felt fragile, like standing on thin ice, hearing it creak beneath us. She pulled back just a fraction. Her voice was barely a whisper. "This stays here. I know. If Ethan, he won't." She hesitated, then leaned in, her lips just grazing mine. Not a kiss, but the shadow of one. Careful, deliberate. It was enough to set everything alight. I kissed her, tentative at first, testing if it was real. But she kissed back, deeper, like she'd been holding it in. She pulled back slightly. "Still just curious?" "Not anymore." Her smile was genuine this time, but we didn't rush. It wasn't about crossing lines or chasing something forbidden. It was about living in a moment we never thought we'd have, one that couldn't be recreated. I traced her shoulder with my fingertips. She closed her eyes. Then came a sound downstairs. Keys. A door. She tensed instantly. I froze. Our eyes locked, breath trapped in our throats. In one fluid motion, she stood, grabbed her hoodie, and pulled it on, yanking the hood up just as footsteps hit the stairs. She glanced at me, voice low and firm. "Not a word." I nodded. She opened the door casually as Ethan's voice echoed from the hall. "Yo, you here?" Cleared my throat. "Yeah, just got here." Ethan appeared in the doorway, grinning. "You two catching up already?" "Barely," I said. He glanced between us. "Cool. Let's head downstairs. I got beers." Mia shot me a quick look. All that intensity, that heat, tucked away under a calm facade, like nothing had happened. But her eyes told the truth. We both knew. We headed downstairs, acting like everything was normal. Ethan popped open 2 beers, handed me one, and sprawled on the couch. He started rambling about some high school buddy getting engaged, showing me a photo on his phone. I laughed when I was supposed to, nodded, played along. But my mind was elsewhere. Mia never came downstairs. Her absence buzzed in my head like static. Her voice, her closeness, the way her fingers had gripped mine. It looped endlessly behind Ethan's chatter. I wondered if she was hiding in her room, waiting for us to leave, or pretending the last half hour never happened. I stayed for an hour, maybe 2, long enough to avoid suspicion. Ethan barely noticed, scrolling through TikTok while I fidgeted with my beer bottle on the couch's edge. When I finally stood, he barely glanced up. "You out?" "Yeah, early morning tomorrow." "Cool. Hit me up later this week." "For sure." I walked to the hallway. Her door was still shut. I paused for a split second, listening. No sound. No movement. I didn't knock. Didn't say a word. I just left. The night air hit me hard, crisp with early fall. I hadn't brought a jacket and walked slower than usual, my steps heavy, like my body was still processing what I felt. By the time I got home, I still hadn't sorted it out. Sleep didn't come easy. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, replaying every second of that afternoon in vivid detail. Her voice, her expression, the exact way she'd said, "Shut the door first." It wasn't a game. It wasn't nothing. But it wasn't something yet either. The next morning, my phone pinged with a message. No name. Just, "You forgot your charger. Should I drop it off or hold it ransom?" I stared at the screen for ages before replying. "Guess I'll swing by to grab it." 3 dots popped up, vanished, reappeared. Then, "Knock this time." I grinned. The week blurred by. I didn't bring her up to Ethan. Didn't ask if she'd mentioned anything. He didn't act like anything was off, so we must have played it cool. But every night, Mia and I texted. Sometimes quick, sometimes drawn out. She'd ask what music I was into. I'd ask what book she was reading. Sometimes she'd send something like, "Still thinking about that quiet?" And I'd reply, "Same." And that was enough. We didn't talk about what was next. We didn't label it. But the door had closed, and neither of us tried to open it the same way again. The next weekend, Ethan was working late. She texted, "Swing by if you're free." No hoodie this time. My heart skipped. I took my time walking over. When I knocked, she opened the door before my hand even dropped. She stood there in a loose tee and leggings, barefoot, hair a mess like she'd been lounging all day. "Forgot what a knock sounds like," she teased. I stepped inside. She shut the door behind me. This time I didn't need instructions.